when I went through the playlist of what's in the show, the live show, one of the things that struck me is how wide a net it really is. And there's pieces that, I mean, almost any genre of music that you can think of, from folk to new age to classical. And so so I guess one of the things you mentioned before, there's an assumption or a misconception maybe that it makes things colder, that it takes away the human element. But have you found that, I mean, people say the same thing about sampling, people say the same thing about drum machines. Do you think that's true at all? Are there cases where it's true?
No, I tend to think that the people that, I'm a person who has always been interested in how things are if they're dissected. I've had a lot of conversations with Eddie Kramer, Hendrix's engineer, and he always tells me the story of how we invented automation. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And so he describes how Hendrix was so elated at the end of the Axis Boulder's Love record that he took the lone master copy and got so inebriated that he left the tapes in the back of the cab, and they kind of had to start mixing the record from square one all over again in a 48-hour period. And I was asking, well, there's a lot of flange effects. He's like, yeah, none of that stuff was invented. Like, we invented that. So Kramer basically had to do the synchronized, choreographed notion with Kramer just basically engineering, like, okay, raise up volume knob and pan it to the left. And, like, pretty much like the second half of Axis Boulder's Love is a winged effort of them inventing sounds that haven't, and effects that haven't been done yet.
This is called modulation.
The question that comes out of this is, when the music gets made, even if the average listener, consumer, doesn't see that it's a piece of electronics, a lot of those things depend very heavily on new technologies, ways of keeping sounds, of distorting sounds, of recording sounds. So do you think overall, is the mission of music roughly the same, or do you think it really has sort of changed? There's been a real change in the way that people make things from 72 to now, let's say.
Again, I think at the end of the day, I don't think that George Clinton had this sort of mission statement in his head that, okay, this song, Maggot Brain, is going to, quietly revolutionize music and influence a nation of guitar players and, carry out a mission. I do think that maybe in his head, he wanted to carry the torch that Jimi Hendrix, by that point, had stopped carrying due to his death in 1970.
Noise, 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 noise.
Nice.
When there's digital, this is something you mentioned before, when you have a sound, you can preserve the illusion of an analog sound, but you're basically just replicating the digital sound, and it can move around in all directions.
You're fulfilling the prophecy. Yeah, you're just fulfilling the prophecy of even as calling yourself a purist. And it is weird that we call ourselves purist of like an original sound, but yet we're fulfilling the prophecy of using electronic devices to preserve something natural.
The script, now a deck of punch cards with all the cues typed in, is fed into the computer, winding up as a reel of recorded tape.